Hey everybody, welcome back to Leading Thriving Cities. This is our new show where we want to shine a spotlight on leadership in public service. We want to have deep conversations about sustainability and how we build a thriving future for our cities. My name is Chad Wright. I'm the founder of Forward Partners. Today we are joined by David Morgan. He is the city manager of the city of Georgetown, Texas, one of the fastest growing cities in America. He's been there for 8 years and has 26 years in public service. He has great insight for us for what it's like to lead a city that is growing so fast. There are so many challenges and complexities really inherent in that, and he's got some phenomenal insight in how to truly disconnect and the importance of learning how to do that in a 24/7 job. I cannot wait for you to see this interview. All right, David, thank you for being here on Leading Thriving Cities. So I want to just jump in with our first question because part of why we created this is for people to understand public service. What's one thing you wish people understood about your job as city manager, leading a city like Georgetown that's, what is it, one of the rapidly fastest growing cities in America?
City in the country, yes.
Which is both a blessing and a curse at the same time.
We were super excited to be number 8 on the list of the census until we found out they lowered the threshold to 20,000.
Okay.
So any city 20,000 and up, we're in that fastest growing city list. And it used to be 50,000.
Yes.
So that's why we made the fastest growing city the last 2 years.
Yeah.
But we were the only city in the top 15, or one of the only cities in the top 15 fast growing cities that were over 50,000. So technically, we're still the fast growing city in the country over 50,000 population.
I'm excited.
We're not trying to be.
Exactly. I'm excited to learn about some of the challenges that come with that.
Okay.
So leading a city of that size, what's the one thing you wish people really understood about that role?
Well, most people don't know what a city manager does at all. In fact, a lot of one of the most common questions I get is, do you ever think that you'll get promoted and be mayor someday? And they just don't understand.
They don't understand the structure.
Right. They don't understand the structure at all.
Yeah.
So it's
although
really
Mayor Morgan, it's got a nice sound to it. I'm just
I know.
Say.
Well, that's the mayor of Round Rock.
Okay.
He's doing a great job. But no, I would say externally. So I thought about this question 2 ways. Externally, what do people think in the community, or people that just friends of mine, and then internally within the organization. So externally, I think people hear city manager and think that you manage the city, so therefore you know the detail of every question that I might have. Yeah. And what I like to say is that my knowledge is a mile wide. Yes. But it's an inch deep. Yes. That's it. Yeah. So I can stand up, or I can talk about most, if not all, the pressing issues in our community. Mm-hmm. But if you get into the detail, so if someone has an issue with a code enforcement issue or a pothole or something like that they've been working with the city to get fixed, and I don't know there's some people that assume I know the answer to that. And then internally, I think what people don't appreciate, and I really didn't even appreciate this until I became a city manager after working in city management for 17 years, was how closely the city manager works with the council. And if you go to a city manager conference and you hear city managers ask, catch up with each other, one of the first questions is, how's your council doing? How's your council? Because that really drives your workload and work plan and kind of your stressors more than anything else. So I think those are probably the 2 things that would be helpful for more people to understand. With
the external one, I think it's interesting that you said your knowledge is a mile wide and an inch deep, because then you have a layer of directors under you.
That's right.
That their knowledge is much deeper. It's much more comprehensive, right? And I've seen some city managers, I'm not sure if you've seen this, where they try to be the person that it is both a mile wide and a mile deep. And it becomes more than they can handle, but I'm not sure if they're fully aware of that. Did you ever wrestle with that, with trying to have all the answers?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think that there are times where it's really important to get more than an inch deep, right?
Sure.
So, for example, in Georgetown right now, we're working on contracting for additional water for our community and for our water territory for the next 50 years. Yeah. And so it's critical for me I need to be very engaged with that level of, a project and making sure that, that I'm more than just an inch deep in that topic. So
that's
I think
fascinating part about your job, though, is it is 50 years from now, whether or not Georgetown has water will come down to the work you and your team are doing today.
Thank you for tightening my chest right now.
And 50 years from now, you're probably not the city manager. Nobody knows your name, but
I will wake up at 3 a.m. and think about what you just said. Yes,
but I think that's the interesting part, the exciting part about it, right? Is
absolutely.
you are setting the course of the future of the entire city, and there's a steadiness to that has to happen, right?
Yeah, and I would say that's a lot of what I am reminded of that I need to do in my role is help connect people with that purpose, because I'm not the only one doing that. Actually, every person in the city of Georgetown is either working to make people's lives better today.
Yes.
So that's whether it's sustaining or saving or enhancing lives or supporting the people that do.
Yeah.
They're doing that every day, and there's a huge sense of purpose that you and gratitude and gratefulness you get to being a part of that. And every person that works in a city has that in common. Mm-hmm. But with Georgetown growing so fast, one of the things we talk about is we are also laying foundations for future generations. Yeah. And what kind of foundation are we laying? And that's not only something we talk about with our staff, but it's also something obviously our council is very focused on as well. Mm-hmm. And it's important that while we face the pressures today, we've got to make decisions that sometimes are unpopular to make sure that that the next several generations are benefiting from decisions that we're making today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you, one of the things you said there is you keep your people kind of connected to that larger purpose and that larger vision. What are some ways you effectively do that?
Well, I remind them. So, for example, we have, part of it's just engaging with employees. One of my favorite things we do, it's not the only thing we do, but my favorite things we do is we meet on a monthly basis for birthday lunches.
Okay.
So we, when I first started in 2015, I think the first week I was there, I got a stack of 100 and something birthday cards that I was signing for people I had no idea.
Yes.
And I knew very few employees at that time. And it's hard with an organization of around 1,000 people to know everyone as well.
Yeah.
And so I just felt very impersonal. It felt very impersonal for me to sign these cards saying, "Hey, best wishes you for your birthday." That
best
I don't
wishes,
know.
George.
Right. Yeah.
I've never met.
Right. Exactly. And so we created this birthday lunch to create a point of connection for people across the organization to be able to see the different services that are provided in the city. Because when you're head down working on making sure that there's safe drinking water, you may not worry about the electric utility or the parks department or anyone else. But I know that as our organization, we are better when we are aware of each other and as well as looking for opportunities to collaborate together. Because that's the best way to operate. So it's a way in which to gain better visibility for our employees. But it's also a chance to ask difficult questions of the city manager. So we do it anonymously. Didn't do that at first, and realized that the questions weren't as probably as meaningful as they needed to be for employees who might have real questions about things that are happening in the community or the direction our organization is going, or just a problem they see or something they don't agree with that they want to get a better answer on. So we have people submit questions, but that is the opportunity to talk about some of the most pressing issues, and then at the same time connecting them in to how they're making this community better and talking about what that looks like.
I like that.
Most people, when you get up in the morning, you turn the faucet on, you turn the lights on. Georgetown has its own electric utility. People don't think about whether that's actually going to work. Right? They don't think about whether the water's actually going to come out. And when they put water in their glass, they're not worried about whether that's safe drinking water or not. For most people, they don't worry about that. Same thing with turning lights on. But in times of emergency, especially during things like Winter Storm Uri, people the public really recognized how important safe drinking water, sustained energy is just for our own the ability to live.
I think we all realized how much we take for granted.
Right. But employees can be so focused in that way that they don't really think about, I'm sustaining someone's life. If I don't do this right, then people could get hurt.
So having you at your level be aware of that, because I think that's one of the number one jobs of leaders is connecting their people to purpose and saying you matter every day. Everything you do makes a difference. Having you at your level do that as you go down through the organization. You got your ACMs in the city manager's office, your directors. Do you equip them to kind of have that same mindset to do the same thing?
I think it's really difficult. Yes, I would love for them to do that.
It's an ongoing practice, right?
I think, and this is, I didn't term this at all. I learned this, and I wish I remember the person that shared this with me. But they reinforced with me that as a city manager, and this is really any leader, you're also the chief meeting officer, right?
Yes.
So you might be the chief executive officer, but you're also the chief meeting officer. Yeah. And so I think, explain why. There's all sorts of resources out there where they talk about how important it is to connect people with the why of what they're doing. Yeah.
So, we talk about the idea that we want people going home every day tired but fulfilled. And the tired comes from we work really hard, and we're very good at that. The fulfilled only comes from, did we have meaning? Did we have wins? Did we make progress somehow? And often, you're right, they get so head down they don't even see it. But to have a leader tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, that was great work. You did good. It costs us nothing to do, but it's also one of the most powerful things we do.
Yeah, and I think it's really important for people to feel that way. They've got to be enabled to do their best work.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they're not for a variety of reasons. It might be a leader that's not encouraging that person to do that.
Yep.
Or it may be an obstacle that's preventable that's no one's willing to address or able to address because it's just someone did that before and weren't able to fix it. So therefore, and so something that shared with me a long time ago that really stuck was, that the large majority of people that come to work, and it's not just cities, just in general, come to work. They want to do a good job. They want to make a meaningful difference. Yeah. But if there's a small percentage of people that don't want to do that. It's a small percentage that for whether they're disengaged or actively
working,
disengaged, actively disengaged, working against the organization or against the employee group. Then that majority of people that are coming to work will be less engaged. They'll say, well, if that problem's not getting addressed, then should I care so much?
Yes.
Right.
I see that all the time where it's, well, if they're not doing their job, why should I do mine?
Right.
And that's really hard, and that shows how important it is as leaders to address those things.
Yeah. 100%.
And often it's, we don't necessarily know how, or we don't feel comfortable doing it. And a lot of it comes down to personality. Like, I may not be a confrontational type, so I'm just going to let it ride. But that kind of is a good segue into our second question. So you were telling me before we started recording that you've been in public service for 26 years. You spent 18 years with, was it Richardson?
17 years with Richardson.
17 years with Richardson. Now you've been city manager for 8 years in Georgetown.
Job hopper.
Big job hopper. You like some stability, don't you?
Two organizations over 26 years.
Which in public service is pretty impressive. That is pretty uncommon.
I'm very fortunate. It's just very fortunate to be able to have that happen. Yeah.
Well, along that journey of 26 years, what's one of the biggest kind of internal things with you that you've had to overcome to progress through your career?
Oh, this is a great question. So I think that probably the first thing that comes to mind is just recognizing I am, and you've helped me with this, remind me of this, but I'm a big achiever. I like to get things done. I like to accomplish things. And but one of the things I've recognized throughout just growing as a leader is I really can't accomplish anything myself, and really need to focus on the team's success and the success of other people.
Yeah. And
went through a huge, for me, just a huge revelation of that, probably in my late 20s, recognizing that really for the work that I do to be successful, I really needed to invest in other people and help other people be successful more than focus on my own success. And so I'm continually reminded of that.
Was your late 20s kind of when you transitioned into some sort of leadership role?
Exactly right.
Yeah. So it went from I'm going to make the widget every day and I can be successful alone to now I'm leading people that make widgets.
That's right.
Okay.
No, that's right.
Okay. And that's an ongoing practice, isn't it, of reminding yourself it's the team, it's the team.
Well, and I see this. I think that's the one. And you talked about that earlier. Like, have you found it's harder as you get, at a higher level in the organization, not to be the primary doer of, it's letting go of a comfort zone. You've learned to be successful by achieving things individually. You're good at it. You've been rewarded for it, so much so that now you're rewarded into a role that you shouldn't be doing that anymore.
Yes.
Yeah, and so
that's such a hard transition for leaders to make.
That's right. And so being able to and we see this. We have within our organization. I love that this has been a track record for Georgetown.
Yeah.
It is not uncommon. In fact, it's probably more common for a director of a department and organization to be a first-time director in that role.
Yeah.
And so love that there's an opportunity for people to grow that way. But I see that as a struggle, really hard from, hey, you can't, if you're chopping down a forest, one, you gotta, the Covey thing, you gotta sharpen your saw.
Yep.
You gotta take a break to sharpen your saw, but also you have to stand up somewhere high to be able to make sure that you're actually taking down the trees that you're supposed to be taking down and not taking down the trees you're not, and you know which direction you're heading. Yeah. And you can't do that unless you take a break, sit from a different vantage point, and do that for your team. And so I'm continually in the process of that. More comfortable in that role because I've been in that role for a long time.
Right.
But
even then, there's always more to continue to progress.
This is going to sound crazy.
I'm ready for crazy.
I miss doing my own PowerPoint.
You're one of those nerds?
There's something about
the creative process,
of telling a story to the council, to the community, and about how that's done. And I look at PowerPoints or look at presentations all day long. Look at memos. And so, but I am not the creator of it. I'm typically I am almost always the editor of it and working to make it better, which is great. But I still miss it.
Is there ever an opportunity to just say, you know what, on this one, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to be that guy. Spend 3 hours, knock it out.
I can tell you over a 12-month period of time, I probably developed 2 PowerPoints myself. Yeah. And just in the role that we have within our organization. So I'm not trying to say that's for every city manager. Someone listening to this is going, that lazy person. I mean, he doesn't do work. I'm like, I'm doing it. Believe me, I have a lot of work I'm doing. I just am not the one because that's not my primary role. My primary role is to kind of be a conductor of an orchestra and to and to lead with our council.
Yep. Yeah. One of the things you talked about was the idea of sharpening your saw, and sometimes that is I need to learn new things. I need to grow in new things. Often it is I need to disconnect. I need to rest.
Why are you doing this to me?
I know, but I will say
not on this. These aren't on the questions.
I will say I showed up to Georgetown a few months back to do a personality thing, and I didn't know this, but you were on a vacation, a good one, and I just asked the staff how you were doing, and they're like, he's on vacation. It's great for him to get away. Like they want to see that. I said, well, how's he doing with disconnecting? They're like, he's working on it. And so you're in a 24/7 job, right? And I think there's this common belief that it has to be 24/7 and there's no other way. But you're starting to try to model to your team, hey, we need to disconnect. Yeah. So how is that going? How are you wrestling with that?
Well, okay. So I'm doing okay. I would just say this. I have about a year and a half ago, maybe or so, about a year and a half ago. No, it's been longer, 2.5 years ago. I went to a conference to speak. I was going to speak at a conference about a program we were doing, and decided to get there early just to benefit from listening to other people. Yeah. And there was a therapist that was talking about chronic stress, and I had every symptom, not just lightly. Yeah. I had heavy doses of every symptom, and it was a huge wake-up call for me, just about how I'm handling chronic stress in my life and how it's showing up for me as well and burning me out, but also affecting the people around me. So I actually have a check I've developed. It's kind of led me to all the way to getting down to a checklist of certain things I do in order to, on a weekly basis, in order to manage chronic stress. And that includes a spiritual component, a gratitude component, because I'm so focused on addressing problems
and what hasn't been achieved yet.
Right. Yeah. That if you don't take a step back and recognize the things that are going well, that it really warps your perspective.
Yes.
So it helps with perspective, as well as making sure that I'm taking time to express gratitude to other people. Mm-hmm. It's about taking time with just, physical health, as well as spending time with friends. Mm-hmm. So it's all of those things that I kind of manage on a weekly basis, just so that I attempt to show up as my best self every day.
Yeah.
It includes, like, I'm supposed to be patient all day, 5 out of 7 days. I don't do 7 out of 7.
What does patience look like for you?
Well, it just looks like not getting frustrated in a meeting and saying something that I'll later regret.
Yep.
Because I'm in a role of authority where I have I shouldn't do it, but I have no one's going to call me out on it.
Yeah. And every word has massive weight.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so so having much more self-awareness and trying to discipline around that. But in order for me to do that, I have to be in a place where I'm showing up well. So that's kind of like the final measure, I think. All these other things that I try to do on a daily or weekly basis that leads to me being able to show up and being present, and then not being in the midst of problems, not trying to short circuit something and lose my patience. And so that's kind of the ultimate measure of how I'm doing. Now, I am not avoiding your question.
No, you've given good answers.
Okay. But you asked, like, taking real breaks. And so I am taking breaks. I'm not great at the one thing that you and I can disagree on, and it's okay, is
I'm fine if you want to be wrong. It's not a problem.
I know. And I'm like, so that's your opinion, man. So is like, I took a week's vacation in the spring. And it was awesome. We played golf, which is one of my hobbies, and got away. Great. But I did check email every day, not because I was anxious about it, but because I just don't want to face. I probably, I don't know
mountain when you.
I don't
get
even
back.
know how much email I get a day. It's hundreds. And so, so it's just practical for me to take 10 or. I mean, I didn't spend all my time on my phone, worried about.
Well, and here's the interesting part: is it's not the way you're doing it. It's not a bad thing, because what you're doing, maybe without realizing it, is you're observing the natural rhythms on a daily, weekly basis that you need to observe to be healthy as you can be. Most people don't do those things. They don't rest on the weekends. They don't have intentional practices to orient themselves towards health. And then they rely on this week or 2 week vacation to be this magical restorative time for everything. And it's not built for that. It can't necessarily overcome all your bad habits, right?
Yeah.
It's like if you work out 5 days a week, but you also eat terribly 7 days a week, you're going to make no progress.
Yeah.
And so you're observing those small, in the moment things that are really going to make a big difference, more so than a week-long vacation.
But taking extended time off is important.
Yes.
And I'm trying to do that. So so I am. You can hold me accountable to this. I'm having my 30th wedding anniversary next summer.
Congratulations!
Thank you. And I'm working towards taking 2.5 weeks off. And going somewhere. And I will be going somewhere where probably will not be checking email.
So when is this?
Well, I haven't nailed down the.
When is it roughly?
It's going to be mid to late July.
Mid to late July. So we can hold each other accountable because
all right.
Next July next August marks 20 years of owning a business. And I have not taken an extended break in 20 years. I've taken a couple weeks off here and there, but like
you got your own business,
like a sabbatical. Yeah, I know, but I want a sabbatical. I watch these people that are like, "Oh, I take a sabbatical." I'm like, "That sounds magical." And so I told my team a couple weeks ago, I'm like, "Hey, I really want to start planning for how we do this."
Yeah.
Because I can't. If I just disappeared for a month right now, it wouldn't be great.
Yeah.
But that's my goal for next July. Is I'm just gone for a month.
All right.
And so we'll hold each other.
We'll
accountable.
Call each other every day and email each other on our sabbatical. On our
yes. I'll text you every day. How's it going? Why the hell are you looking at your phone right now?
No, but so I will, and it's really the strength. It's So last summer we had to go to some pretty stringent water restrictions.
Yeah.
And I'd planned last summer was my 50th birthday, as well as my wife's 50th birthday. And for her 50th birthday, we went on a beach trip out of the country.
Yeah.
And had been planned for a while, and we have canceled those trips in the past due to things
happening in the city. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I made this, pinky promise, whatever, all of it, all the promises that I would not cancel this. So lo and behold, literally a few days before we're leaving, it hits the fan with some water issues with demand, and with I won't get into it other than just to say that some pretty hard decisions were going to have to be made over the next week.
Yeah.
And I was leaving and wouldn't be a part of those. And so
that's scary.
So I left.
Yeah.
And
so as of today, Georgetown is still standing.
Yes, you're right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they have
great
water.
Decisions were being made.
Okay.
Great decisions were made while I was gone.
Yep.
And I felt at peace with the whole thing. So that's work that's not the result of just something snapped my fingers and happened. It's something I've been really working hard to get to a place where I can feel that way.
And it's an ongoing practice too, because it is, like, I find even in times, like, I rest pretty well. I still find times where we'll get in a season where we're working a lot of projects and I just get head down. And even yesterday I said, I updated a couple of topics for an upcoming show this weekend. And Emily's response was, so you work this weekend, huh? And so, like, we've kind of built this atmosphere of we're caring for each other, make sure nobody is putting in too much. But even I have to be very intentional about it, because it is so easy to veer off back into burnout without trying too hard. Now, I will say your work to trust your team, and this kind of goes back to something we talked about earlier. When you've got the city manager who tries to be a mile wide and a mile deep in everything, and they have their hand in every single thing, usually that is I don't necessarily trust my team, so I've got to make sure my hands are around everything. That city manager doesn't have the ability to leave and say, you know what, I trust y'all to make some great choices. And so you have very probably intentionally built out that team and developed them, and it allows you to do that. So that's been probably a long ongoing process, hasn't it?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. That is. But I think that I've been in that place for a long time. So I don't think that's really been the obstacle. I think it's been more about me, and just being at the place where and really what drove the kind of the switch that changed for me was recognizing how ineffective I was being, or that I'm not being the best leader for other people if I'm not doing these things to keep me healthy. And part of that is taking breaks. Part of that is, practicing what I preach, which is helping people, letting people thrive in the role that they have. We were asking them to do. Yeah.
That's beautiful, because it is, like you said, it's an ongoing practice. And I love that as leaders, that development, all the challenges we really run into are probably internal. We think it's external, but really it is, can I learn new ways of thinking about things, and can I rewire my perspective? And that makes a difference, but it's so hard to do.
But I don't, it might, the sense of the thing, kind of the struggle that city managers might have with control, because I think that's a lot of, like, wanting to be a mile wide and a mile deep is kind of a control thing. And there can be all sorts of motivations behind that, right? So,
including pressure from the public, from council. Like, some people expect that of a city manager.
I didn't realize. I've worked for a city manager, like reported directly to a city manager or a deputy city manager my whole career. For 17 years, did that. So and worked a lot and worked closely with city council members on various issues. And so when coming into the city manager role, I thought, well, I know this, right?
That's what everybody thinks.
Yeah, but when you say something that you think is funny, and it probably is funny as the assistant or deputy city manager, it may not be funny as the city manager.
Yes. Yeah, like, it's a different world, isn't it?
It's a different world. There's things that you think I even literally think my heart's in the right place on this, And man, that did not come across the way that I thought it was supposed to come across. Yes. So just kind of controlling yourself in that way. But the other thing that the biggest surprising thing was, and this is not a criticism of council members, but I mean, 90-something% of council members have no background in city government at all when they're coming on board, right? So they could be business leaders, obviously, community leaders.
Usually pretty accomplished in their own way.
Absolutely, So this is not a criticism, but they just don't know anything. So this realization that we have 7 council members, the realization that my bosses are 7 council members who have no background in city government, who really don't, like they see probably, I don't know, under 50%, maybe even under some days under 25% of actually what I do to be be successful in my role. That they're the ones that on any given council meeting could have 4 of them decide, we're just ready for a new city manager.
Yes.
And then on top of that, you get this. You're on these listservs for articles where there every day there's an article about a city manager getting fired or leaving or whatever.
Who's probably, by the way, doing a pretty good job. That's the thing that blows me away about this business is the politics gets involved. And you can go from I'm doing a great job to I'm unemployed in one day. And that's an interesting pressure that y'all have on you. And I love doing council retreats because I love getting to connect with them and say, look, I want you to walk out here fully understanding your role and the impact you have as leaders of this city on the staff. I also want you to understand that I feel for you because they are all, like I said, they're elected by different people for different reasons, and most of them don't have experience with city government, so they're having to learn really, really fast. They're not really given the tools to be an effective team, but everyone expects them to be an effective team. That's a recipe for disaster, and that's why I think the majority of city councils and city managers have trouble connecting and making that work because nobody really has the tools to be successful. But it sounds like you've navigated that potential problem really well over the last 8 years.
Yes. No, and I've realized that, I unpacking all that, realizing that, wow, there's some of this is driven, some of my anxiety or control is driven around, well, I wonder if this is the problem, this is the issue, this is the mistake that was made. This
is the one.
This is the one, right? And you can't live like that.
No.
So I've worked out of that, not being in that mentality.
What's the mindset that helps you not get sucked into that? Because
having enough problems happen where you're like, no, okay,
you've survived enough. You're
or something happened, something happened with some department, and you're working to solve it, and you're giving the council a heads up on it, and they're, and you have ultimate accountability for all that. But the council, but by and large, it's not every council member, but by and large, council members understand, relatively understand your role, and they understand you can't control everything, and your job is to help make sure things go well. When problems do happen.
There's a reason they call it city manager, not city controller.
Right, exactly. So it's just experience and just also the recognition of that, you can't live in that mode, and it's not healthy to be there. So, But I think that for me, I've worked, and I haven't counted all the council members I've worked with, but I did for some reason count how many council members I've worked with in Georgetown, and it's been 18 council members over 9 years. So that's, I don't know where that is on the scale, but pretty
good.
I have been in a place for the last four or 5 years where there's not anyone that hired me that's on the council.
Okay. So you've had to make that transition, building new relationships and casting vision and connection, right?
Yeah, and you're starting from ground zero because, where they entered in the organization and the community is all the things that you worked on before that, that have allowed you to build trust and level of confidence with council members. You're not starting from zero.
Yeah.
So, which is just the way that is. But I think it's really important for council members to really make sure that they know, and that's my job, is for them to know that, like, I work for them.
Yep.
But I don't. But most of their decisions are only going to matter if there's 3 other people that agree with them.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Individually, they don't necessarily have power. It's them together.
But it's important for them to know that I'm there. I will meet with them at least on a monthly basis, as long as they're willing to let me do that.
Yep.
And most of it's not about it's usually about things that are on their mind, things that they want to get accomplished, and me kind of talking with them about how they could get that done, or just kind of walking through the recognition that the majority council do not want to get that done. So how else can they
helping
deal with
them
that?
Navigate that?
But it's making sure that even if, because every council I've dealt with, there's at least one council member, if not more, that feel on the outs, with the rest of the council. Yeah. And so it's making sure that person understands that, like, just because they don't agree with what this individual person wants to do, doesn't mean I don't still, they're not. They matter to me just as much as any other.
You see them as
member.
a team together rather than all these individuals. As we talk about this, navigating council, navigating the pressures of the public, the pressures of everything that can go wrong in a rapidly growing city, it's highly complex. And I think one of the things you've hit on over and over again is really the version of you that shows up every day to deal with that complexity determines how you're going to do. Yeah. If you show up and you haven't been doing the practices of taking care of yourself, you're probably not going to handle any of that particularly well. That sounds overwhelming to me on a day if you're not taking care of yourself. That's probably a lot. And the goal is to stack up more days than not that feel like wins because you are taking care of yourself. Yep. So you've 26 years in public service. If you had to go back and talk to the version of you that was thinking about getting into it, you said your first job was getting coffee, and when an unhappy member of the public showed up, talking to them. If you had to go back and give advice to that person or somebody young today who's thinking about getting into public service, what advice would you give them to help them navigate that?
Well, I'm obviously am biased in this because of my tenure with the organizations I've been in, but one of the things that you just recognize is, like, big projects, big things that happen that benefit the community typically don't happen overnight. Yes. And so I've seen over time that there's just a lot more mobility, and there's kind of, if someone stays in a role for a long period of time, it's almost it's just not as common as it used to be, if that makes sense. So I think what people in public service are missing out on, if they do move between cities a lot or in different roles, is they miss the payoff of being able to work on something and see the benefit that it can have in the community in which they're working and maybe in likely living. And that to me is one of the best parts of the job. Yes, is seeing something to fruition. I mean, I worked on years ago, and it was in Richardson, but we worked on it ultimately was a parks project. It was this hardwood forest in the middle of the DFW area, in a very dense developed area that was privately owned. It was going to be pretty much the forest was going to be taken down for apartments. And we worked on this really complex project with multiple departments, and then the property owner to ultimately structure a purchase of it to where we're now the city of Richardson owns it, and they're the fourth owners of that land in the history of, at least as far as back as we know, and we're going back to the Native Americans, and those were the first owners of the property. So. And it's this hardwood forest going to be preserved for people to enjoy for generations, decades in the future. But that took multiple years to get that done. Yes. So if I were not in that role for that period of time, I mean, you don't get to see the benefit of that.
That's one of those things you can point to and say, okay, there's a generational difference there. And I think a lot of what I'm hearing, because there's our careers where we can get really impatient, right? Am I advancing fast enough? Am I getting raises fast enough? Is my title growing fast enough? But to stop and deploy the patience you were talking about earlier, to say, hey, why am I in this? Am I in this for the money, for the title, for the promotion? Or am I in this for impact? Am I in this for the fact that people are going to be walking through that forest enjoying it 100 years from now because you were patient and the effort was put in? Like, I think that is really interesting, and I'm curious the mindset of people when they get into public service. Like, how much do y'all talk about, hey, patience? This is a job that involves patience.
Yeah, I think that's a hard thing to sell, because because it sounds like a guy with gray hair who's from a different age.
It's all in how you sell it, man.
I know, but it's hard for me to say that, to say, hey, back in my day, so.
It is, but as I'm thinking about these kids coming into public service, because I work with people usually at your level, director level. I don't get to work with the people on the front line, and I really want to do more of that, because as humans, we are all designed to want to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. Right. And while it may be us gray-haired old men sitting here going, guys, really focus on the future, focus on generational impact. Yeah. The thing I've learned is if you tell that story that is bigger than us over and over and over and over again, something eventually switches. Even if the first time they hear it, they're like, that's BS. Like, eventually they can start to come around, but it takes that repetition.
It's back to what we talked about before, which is, connect people to the meaning of what they're doing every day and what they're doing for the future. Yeah. But I also think it's helping. I think the better way to focus on it is to find ways that, because what I find is people, this is every age, but even more so, younger generations they're very, very much want to grow and want to have, they're constantly wanting to look and develop and look at new things and learn new things, which is awesome. Yeah. So how do we allow someone to do all that while still being in a role they're very much needed for multiple years. Yes. And so that's why we've done, we've invested quite a bit in within our organization in doing development work. So whether that be lean training that we ask everyone to do, we have emotional intelligence training, we do we have an engaged leader program. We're on the 7th year of doing that, where people at any level in the organization can apply to be a part of that. So we fund and support all of those things. Yep.
And it makes a huge difference too. Yeah, I can just tell you from the outside coming in, it's funny, we talk all the time about how much we love working in Georgetown, because y'all's people respond with a hunger going, oh, let's learn more, let's do more, let's grow more. Whereas sometimes you're coming to organizations going, okay, let me convince you that you need to grow, that you need to do, and that y'all have that culture of growth already built in because you've invested in it.
Yeah, no, and I think, we just need to, there's lots of dials to turn to make sure that we're doing that in a way that, because every employee may not want to do a full engaged leader program, but they're willing to do something else. Yeah. And so we just need to give a lot of opportunities to give feedback, to help them, equip them, as well as equip the organization to handle the sticky problems, so that we lower the frustration level. We're a Gallup organization, and do a engagement survey once a year in order to be able to kind of give some measurement around how we're doing in that area, and also there's good follow-up to have teams work on ways to improve. And so there's just a lot of things that we're doing to give people opportunities to grow, stay engaged, for us to measure where we see disengagement, and it's just ongoing work. You're never at the mountaintop on that. You're always just climbing the mountain.
I love that. Well, one of the things, one of my theories is that a city can't thrive unless the city staff is thriving. And often we are doing way too much with way too little. There's not enough resources. So what are some things, we want to kind of have a conversation with all of our guests about, what do cities need to completely rethink? What does public service need to rethink in order to help our staffs thrive in the future?
So I'm looking down my notes because I wanted to make sure I'm thoughtful in that.
I think this is one of the most important questions we wrestle with.
Well, and you're getting to what I want. One of the things is they're creating unlimited budgets is very hard. In fact, I've gone through numerous rounds and years of cutting budgets in order to meet constrained environment, deal with the constrained environment, and it is super tempting, and I've done it myself, is to cut training and development. Yeah. And there may be ways in which you can do that on a temporary basis, but I think that it's really short-sighted to do that. Find other ways to cut. Yeah. to me. So I think just making sure, just all the things we were talking about in terms of having opportunities for people to grow internally and externally, commitment to that is extremely important, and that's an important thing to rethink. In a constrained environment.
I like that.
Also, I think that there's just this there's an easy button criticism that people can make about bureaucrats, and people feel that, employees feel that, so it's resisting that and doing things that to reward and express thanks and actually encourage rest. So we just had our employee and family picnic last week, to where we closed down as many operations as we could, and invited people and their families out, so we could personally thank them and have a fun afternoon. I can tell you, 20 years ago, that would have not been acceptable at all. At all. In fact, I still get the nervous twinge, like, okay, we're going to have someone who says, I've got to get a building permit on Friday afternoon.
Why are y'all out
really
playing?
You closed the offices one afternoon out of the entire year. The one day I needed it to get a permit. And so those things still kind of are concerning to me, but I think that prioritizing thanks and appreciation is really important, and something that needs to be, I think we're making progress on that, but that's a rethink.
It's valuing the human side of things. Like you said, it's easy to kind of view the bureaucratic side of things. The reality is we're not robots, and y'all are not cogs in a machine. You're human beings trying to do a really hard job. And so I love that idea of let's prioritize that.
Well, and I think that also one of the things, and this is one of the things I take more ownership than probably any other city employee, is helping encourage political stability within our community. Specifically within the city. I've said to council members, not recently, but I've said to council members in the past, when they've been really upset about something and they're ready to go like flamethrower on everything, in order to vent or express frustration or try and solve it. And what I like to say is, hey, no one wants to live next to that neighbor that fights in the front yard. Right. And so
that's a great saying.
I mean, like, and I'm not trying to, like, all I'm saying is that it's, it's like, it is okay to disagree. It's okay to, but no one wants to be around that, and no one wants to, and, translate that into an organization where that's the way I look at it is, family members are fighting in the front yard. And
everybody's embarrassed by that, right?
Right. And so, and it's not productive. It doesn't achieve anything. And so that's what I work on with council. Well, we need to disagree. Y'all need to disagree. You need to, vehemently disagree on certain things. But how do you do that in the way that actually continues to maintain trust with each other? But also maintains the level of trust and professionalism with staff, and if you want this to be a great organization, a great community, you need to be led by great leaders, and you do that not by being a bad place to work, or not by doing it to where every council meeting when you come up and have a staff member come up and present, it's a time to their time in the quote unquote Shark Tank, and that is a unhealthy way to look at it. So that's, I feel like it's my job to help meetings go well. In fact, I remember it was not always that way in Georgetown, and I'm not trying to. We've worked collectively. We've worked a lot to try and be in a better place. But I remember one of the first council meetings I was in, and we had a person presenting on a topic. I can't remember the topic, but I remember who it was. It was an employee who worked for the organization a long time. And they were presenting, and one of the council members asked a question that wasn't really on topic. It was actually a little off topic, and this person paused, and I've been there. I've sat and I've presented, and it's an intimidating thing to do. And they stumbled a little bit in their response, because they were prepared to talk about something else. And I could feel the mood change on council, like, it's almost like blood in the water.
Yes.
And all of a sudden you got a couple other questions, and at the time I was sitting at the end of the dais, and I remember going like this, looking down at the mayor, and this is my first council meeting.
Yeah.
Going like this. And
also in your head going, is this the one that gets me fired? Council meeting?
No, that wasn't it. This is me going, what is going on?
Yeah.
None of this is helpful.
Yes.
And so I'm, doing that, and I felt like I was doing that for 30 seconds. I probably wasn't. But I'm like, I'm here. Yes. I'm actually at this meeting. Yes. Can you recognize me?
Yeah.
And I remember the mayor looking, oh, Mr. Morgan, would you like to say something? And I said, yes, let me. And I basically said, hey, this is not the topic we're here to talk about, but these are important questions. Why don't you let us do some research?
Yeah.
We'll come back and we'll present on it, or we'll follow up with y'all. Just send you an email about this, and they were like, oh, okay, thank you very much. Yeah. Like all of a sudden, it just everything went back to okay, we're going to focus on this topic.
Yeah.
And what I didn't know at the time is, and this is not being critical of anyone else, but just the culture that had formed was not a common thing to happen. And that that's fundamentally what we do.
Yeah.
As in my opinion, as the city manager, is we are helping. We're that connection between staff and council, and we're there to help things go well on both sides.
Yes. Well, and I think the idea of rethinking the political side of things, because I think you're right. I've seen more and more of the national politics come down even lower, and it's created these divides on councils. Sometimes it is in the past. I think divides on council were, hey, I don't really think that we should do this thing with this park or this road. Well, I think we should. And as the national politics come in, it's like, well, you're different than me, so you're automatically bad, and I have to oppose everything you do. And so I like that idea of city managers, and again, this puts more pressure on city managers, but to be the one that says, hey, can we keep that out of this as much as possible? Because we're focused on the future of this city.
Yeah, and it's about relationships, I really think. So when I started in 2015, I decided to host a couple barbecues in my house just to say thanks.
Yes.
And one of those was with the council and their spouse, just purely social.
Yes.
And or significant others, and just invited them to the house.
Yep.
And the several of these council members have been working on council for a while, and their spouses were introducing themselves to each other. They had not met.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking,
and
it was very different culture in Richardson. That was not the case.
Yeah.
In fact, in Richardson, I used to host we would have a council meeting that would end early so we could go watch the national championship football and basketball game, NCAA, championships together, because people enjoyed being with each other, and there's this kind of thing. So and that doesn't mean that they didn't disagree and they didn't have issues. But they had relationships.
But the relational piece is huge.
Yeah, and so recognizing that I'm sitting there in this new city, in this new role, and these council members who have been working together for multiple years, probably only spend time on the dais at a council meeting. That's it, together. And there's so many important things to work on that, not that they need to be buddy and best friends, or that's not it at all. But to have
some relationship, as
a foundation.
You've hit on what Simon Sinek talks about what's gone wrong in Washington. Is back in the day when you were elected, you took your family to Washington with you. And so you would spend all day in Congress griping at each other and disagreeing and going back and forth. And then you would go sit next to them at your kid's baseball game, or you would go sit next to them at church. And there was a relationship there. And because there was a relationship, we could find a middle ground. And I think with councils, that's such an important insight of how can we gather them in ways that are not violating Texas law.
Of course, right.
But we're gathering in a way that is just strictly relational. There's so much value in that. And I think that's what most councils are missing, which is why a lot of them are very contentious.
Yeah. No, it's just recognizing we're all humans.
Yes.
Right? So we're all flawed. We all have problems.
Yes.
None of us are perfect.
Yeah.
And it's helpful when you see that person that way.
Yeah.
That it just helps with being able to, be able to get through some tough issues and still get on the other side and still are able to work together.
So what do you say to the city manager who's like, my council hates each other? What can I do to try to get them to be more relational? Is it barbecue? Is that the answer?
I think it's going to be I think it's really going to be just depending on the situation.
Yeah.
I think that there are times where there's so much it depends on the situation, right?
Yeah,
so it depends on. For me, it was fortunate in that when I was hired, they all kind of came together to select a city manager. So there was something in common that they had.
They had just worked together on a big project.
Right. And there was, and also, we were all in the honeymoon period. They wanted to be their best selves, and I wanted to be my best self and all that stuff. So it's like, yes, come on for a barbecue. Invite your spouses and maybe.
So it was kind of the perfect time for that.
Right. Okay. So there's timing. And I think that's, someone told me that. I forgot I need to attribute more stuff to people. So the way I deal with it is like, I didn't come up with this, so don't quote me on it. But someone said, it's in the good times. John Albanian was a longtime professor at University of Kansas. But he said, the times to work on building relationships, to work on creating processes to allow for good governance is during the good times, not during the hard times. Because it's during the hard times that you need to lean on that work that you've done. So we meet when we do our council retreats and do our goal setting. What we do every time is we talk about governance first.
Yeah.
And governance is really about how are we going to work together?
Yes.
How are we going to work with the public? How are we going to work with staff? What are the things we're going to personally do to commit to that?
Yep.
And how are we doing with that?
Yes.
And then we go on and adopt it as a governance policy, and then the council adopts that governance policy. And then it's something they hold each other accountable to.
Yeah.
I
love that.
It doesn't always work well, but
you have to at least have the lanes defined to know when somebody swerves outside the lane.
Absolutely.
We were doing a retreat the other day for a council, and I was like, you guys need a code word that says we have veered outside the lane. And so they developed a code word for when someone has veered outside the lane. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but if they ever do it in a council meeting, you'll know, because it'll be really obvious.
That's great.
They'll laugh about that.
But I think that's so important to focus on that way, and not all cities do that. But I mean, I know we haven't done this, but I know there have been some city councils that have actually and rotate it to have someone grade themselves on how they did during the council meeting.
Okay.
So at the end, they go, okay, now this is what we've said we're going to do.
Yes.
How well have we done that?
There really has to be this base level of trust amongst the council to even respect what that person's going to say.
Yeah.
That's the trust that's built when we're breaking bread together, when we're having barbecue and we're just relaxing and our spouses are talking.
That's right.
That's maybe one of the most valuable things that I've heard on this show that we need to rethink, because that when a council is unified, not necessarily that they vote the same, but that they see themselves as a team together. It creates stability for the staff, and one of the number one things I see that causes staff stress is when council is, like I said, nobody wants to be next to the guy who's fighting in the front yard. When that happens publicly, it stresses the staff out.
Absolutely.
And so I think them being unified and stable, and how you can contribute to as city managers, that's a huge insight.
Yeah, what I like to say is we get in bunker mode. Staff gets in bunker mode.
Yes.
They just get down in the bunker. They're going to get in defensive position.
Yes.
And how well are we going to do at serving the public, and what we talked about earlier about laying foundations for future generations. If all we're doing is just trying to survive
100%. And that's the thing. Bunker mode is survival mode, and survival mode is, can I make it through today? It is not, can I create the future?
Yeah.
And that's where I think your role as that buffer. Again, this requires you to be wildly healthy to be a good buffer there.
Yeah.
And I think that's where your health matters more than anything else to the success of the organization.
No pressure,
because
Thanks.
that is
Appreciate
such
that.
a massive. I'll show you some art we have that helps you understand this better.
Yeah,
but
no pressure.
No, I love the idea that coming on this show, y'all walk out just riddled with anxiety.
No,
wasn't the intention, but we'll get there.
Yeah, no, it's all good.
Well, man, this has been an incredible conversation. Thank you so much for the insight. It sounds like you're really doing a great job in Georgetown, caring for the staff, establishing that culture. So I'm excited to see where you go from here.
I'm just trying every day.
I love it, man. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for joining us for Leading Thriving Cities. We are dedicated to giving away everything we teach and, importantly, everything we learn while we're on the ground partnering with cities to develop healthy leaders and thriving teams. You can find all of that leadership development content on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Just search for @ForwardPartner. You can also find more information about what we do at forwardpartners.net.